You're so close. You're almost there. Oh, you made it. Here we are. Oh, now we can get started. I wasn't sure if you were going to make it today or not. Johnny Bouchard, the 11% Pod. My guest today is, full disclosure, Phil Clarkin is one of my favorite people on the planet. Setting aside the fact that I've had the chance to work with him for years, and setting aside the fact that he is one of the most gifted photographers I've met. And folks, I've known a few gifted photographers. He is just one of my favorite people on the planet. And Phil's philosophy is kind of one that, man, everybody's cool. Like, everybody's good. Everybody's fine in my book. I really think probably factors into his work because Phil Clarkin has developed a reputation as not only one of the best photographers in Tulsa, but one of the best photographers in the music industry. I think for me, I think Phil and I met, if I remember right, almost a decade ago. I was doing a Leonard Peltier benefit with Connie Nelson at the BOK Center, and I'd had a photographer lined up, and they reached out and said, "Hey, we have our house photographer. Is it cool if he takes some pictures?" And I said, "Let me check with the artist, but I mean, I'm sure it will be." And everybody's like, "Yeah, whatever, of course." So that's the day Phil and I got to meet. And that turned into, whenever I have any concert in any state or any venue, Phil Clarkin is literally my first call. House photographer for the BOK Center, house photographer for Cain's, house photographer for Tulsa Theater, house photographer for Osage Casinos. When I was there running Osage Casinos for 4 or 5 years, one of the first calls I made was to get Phil in there. Because, people don't understand. There is an art, there's a true art to capturing emotion in 2 dimensions. A lot of people think they're great photographers, but very few people actually are. And there's an art to that. And archival photography, archival recordings can do more for your venue and what your venue is all about and what you're trying to do with your venue than 50,000 printed pages of text. So I called Phil and I said, "Hey, would you like to come do some shows for us?" And he said yes. And again, that turned into any show I've ever done. And Phil has this fantastic, I call it, and I hope I'm not using a misnomer here, I call it like a photography collective. Because Phil and his team of Greg and Brent, of everyone there, is amazing. Because sometimes Phil can't, there may be a show at the BOK Center and at Cain's and at Tulsa Theater and at Osage and Phil can't be in every place at one time. But he's managed to build a stable or an inventory of fantastic photographers who can deliver that same wonderful quality, wonderful integrity of the photos, and help capture moments that I think most people wouldn't be able to do with a camera. With that said, Phil also happens to be just one of the coolest people around. Super laid back. When he and I sat down, because again, we're trying to do these on site, and Phil and I sat down in his studio. I think Johnny Mullinex was doing some recording downstairs, and other guys were coming in and going. And I love recording in people's environments because they're comfortable there, and that energy of what's going on in the background helps enhance the interview, if that makes any sense. And when Phil and I sat down, I think Greg was working on some projects, Greg Bollinger, I think. If it wasn't you, Greg, I apologize. And Phil and I sat down, and it really was a fantastic conversation as to, man, how do you get started in this industry? How do you continue in this industry? Favorite shots of his? I know, we talked about one, what as close as you can have to a famous shot. Green Day, Billy Joe Armstrong with Green Day at Cain's Ballroom, coming right out of COVID. And in that photo, Phil managed to capture all of it. the energy of a Green Day show and the legacy of Kane's Ballroom, the anxiety of a post-COVID society wanting entertainment and wanting to be able to get back together in groups and hear their favorite music. And it was just astounding. And I realized as I was prepping for the interview, Phil has hundreds of shots like that. It wasn't just one amazing shot. There were so many of them out there. But I called and I said, hey, would you sit down and can we talk about this side of it? Maybe some of the restrictions people don't think about that photographers have to, by the way, Johnny B has always taken the opposite approach. I think we talk about this in the interview. I tell Phil, go wherever you want to go, do whatever you want to do. Let me know if someone isn't giving you clearance and I'll get it for you. But it's just a fascinating conversation with a fascinating individual. And I hope everybody else is fascinated too. So here we go. Johnny Bouchard with Phil Clarkin on the 11% Pod. Welcome back to the 11%. I'm your host, Johnny Bouchard. I am telling you, I am so excited today because my guest is not only one of the most respected names in the music industry, really regionally, and in some cases nationally, I should say, but he's also a dear friend of mine. Phil Clarkin, thanks for coming on and hanging out today, man.
Thanks for having me, Johnny. I'm excited.
You know what? Let's just dive into the first five so we can plant some seeds for these conversations, and then we're going to talk about how you and I met and some of the projects that you've had. So, first five facts that may or may not be true about Phil Clarkin. Number one, true or false? Phil Clarkin's passion for photography began as a child running around his family's farm in the Flint Hills of Kansas with an old-school manual advanced Kodak camera.
That is true, yes.
We're going to talk about that because there's so many parts of this sentence, with the technology being the least difficult to swallow. I can't see you running around Flint Hills, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we move forward. Number two, true or false? In addition to shooting in such famed venues as Madison Square Garden and Colorado's Red Rocks, Phil Clarkin is currently the house photographer for multiple venues in his home city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, including Kane's Ballroom and the BOK Center, to name just two.
That is true, yes.
Man, I knew that one was true, but I still had to squeeze it in. Number three, true or false? Phil Clarkin was invited but declined to participate in the world record-setting and smash hit fundraising single "We Are the World."
That is false, but I would have definitely accepted that if I was.
Man, I keep asking everybody on here, hoping that I'll get somebody who's involved with it. You've come pretty close to a lot of the folks who are in that, so that's one of the cool parts. Number four. You know what? I'm going to switch this one. Number four. While many legends, including global superstar acts like the Foo Fighters, have used Phil Clarkin shots on their own websites and album covers, one of Phil's favorite photos is when he captured of Billie Joe Armstrong on stage at Kane's Ballroom on June 20th of 2021.
That is definitely true.
Oh, we're going to talk about that too, because that was such a massive show for Tulsa and for Kane's and for everyone else. And then lastly, true or false, Phil Clarkin acts as executive producer for the Leftover Last Waltz, a fundraiser for the Foundation for Tulsa Public Schools held each year in Tulsa.
Mostly true. I act as the co-executive producer.
Co-executive producer. We're going to say that's true then. Anyway, okay, let's dive into this, man. So Phil and I met. Did we meet at Peltier? The Peltier benefit?
I'm not sure if that's the first time we met. That's the first time we worked together, though.
In 2017, I was doing a benefit for Leonard Peltier. Yeah, we may have met before, but we weren't we hadn't hung or anything.
Right.
And I'd gotten Angela Huckleby, I think, was doing some pictures for us. And the BOK Center said, hey, would you mind if our guy came along? And I said, who's that? And they said, Phil Clarkin. And they just said Annie Lee. I was like, hell yeah, please, I'll Phil, come along. And you and I got to work together, and then we hit it off as friends and have worked together a whole bunch since then. And if I think anyone who knows me professionally knows, if there's a gig I'm doing, literally, production is my first call. You're my second call. And since that Peltier benefit, every show I've done, you or someone on your crew has come and shot it for us.
We have.
And we've gotten fantastic, amazing shots from that. But I have to ask, because if somebody says Phil Clarkin, my first thought is not growing up in the Flint Hills of Kansas. Man, what was it like? What sparked? I know we talked about kind of the manual events, point, click, and in some cases maybe you were working with film and advancing. Man, where did this spark start, and what was it like growing up in Kansas?
Well, I'll get it even more bizarre for you if you don't believe all that. So I grew up on a cattle ranch in the Flint Hills of Kansas. The house I grew up in was a family homestead that was built in 1876. Had 18-inch thick hand-carved limestone walls, no central heat, no central air. The running water was all exterior of the home. And we were farmers. My parents both worked full-time jobs as well, so they were farmers on top of having careers.
Holy moly.
And I was way into the outdoors as a young man, loved to hunt and fish and trap and swim and hike and all that kind of stuff. And I used to take my camera, which was the only camera that I got my hands on at the time. I don't remember the story behind it. I think my mom got it for me somehow, but it was literally one of those rectangular Kodak manual advanced cartridge film cameras. And we were out running beaver traps one morning. We used to trap beavers because they would damage our creek and our water flow for our cattle and stuff. And I took a picture of a sunrise over a beaver dam standing in the middle of the creek, and caught the eye of a photography teacher I had as an 8th grader. And she began to kind of start the conversation with me and spark that interest in me. And it just kind of naturally progressed over the years. I kept shooting some in high school. It was all film at the time, so it was all learning the mechanics of a camera and understanding the difference of the manual settings and how to control all those things. And then when I got to college, I majored in commercial graphics at Pittsburgh State University. And my minor, my emphasis, I guess is what they called it, was product photography. And so I was learning how to shoot medium format film camera, using light tables and lights, and shooting photos that they would use in the JCPenney's catalog or whatever at the time, right? And I was also playing in a rock band at the time. And the two worlds kind of merged together. Digital cameras became available at that time period, and was able to get my hands on a small kind of point and shoot digital camera and take it along with me to music festivals and concerts and things like that. And at first just taking pictures of my friends and the events and things like that. And one thing kind of led to another from there. And one of the music festivals saw what I was doing just as a fan, was like, hey, would you like to try to do this on a more professional level or more official level? And that was the time period that social media was becoming a thing. And so the need for live content but it was a time where social media became, there was a need for content. And so they kind of just put me in the position. We developed ways to do live content, some of the first teams to ever do that, where we were kicking out photos from the event while it was happening on what would have been MySpace and forums and things like that.
GeoCities.
Right. So yeah, that's kind of where the two worlds came together, and then from there it just became a passion of mine. And the story continues. I don't know if you want me to keep going from there.
So, a few random questions. Number one, what was the name of the band in 8th grade? And what kind of songs did you play? Because I'm trying to
The band wasn't in 8th grade. The band was in college. So in 8th grade, I was just a nerdy kid learning how to play guitar and learning how to use a camera. But when I was in college, I was in a band that was called the Phil Mellow Haze Band. We went by P&B, was kind of our moniker. We were a kind of not really a full-on jam band, but kind of that 90s alternative grunge jam thing that was popular, Blues Traveler, Stone Temple Pilots, Black Melon, kind of that thing. And so, yeah, I took that pretty seriously for a while. Was in college at the time, was still doing the photography thing, but we were getting to tour some and playing, all the time, every weekend, and got to open for some cool bands and have some cool experiences through that.
Were you ever like, I'm going to be at Red Rocks. I don't care if it's with a guitar in my hand or with a camera in my hand.
Well, that's what happened once I moved to Tulsa. I always thought I was a guitar player, and then I moved to Tulsa and I put my guitar in the closet.
After you got like 4 shows, and you're like, okay.
No, this isn't going to work. I'm going to have to figure out another way to be in the music industry.
When did the move to Tulsa happen?
We moved here, it would have been, I guess, I moved here around 2007, I think, or 2008. My wife moved here like 2005, 2006, in that period to start medical school. So there was like a year gap where she lived here and I was finishing college, Pittsburgh State. I guess I graduated in '06. I would have moved here in '06.
Nice.
And we got married, and she was a resident in medical school down here. I moved down here, and my first job here was working as a industrial painting equipment salesman. And I worked with the factories around town, installing painting systems and maintaining pumps and guns and equipment.
This is why I love having these conversations. I can't picture, it's so funny because my last conversation, the last episode that I recorded, I sat down with Shauna S. Baker, and I said, sometimes I can't see people doing anything other than what I know them doing now. And I guess, honestly, if you would have said, well, I came out of my mom with a camera in my hand and settings and lighting, I would not have surprised me at all. I can't fathom you because I know you as the artist and such a high-level producer for what you do. I can't figure. Were you happy doing that, or were you like, man, this is just a way to pay the bills?
Well, I was lucky. I was in a situation where I could still do both. I was nurturing the photography at the time, building contacts, learning to become a better photographer. That's one of my things. Everybody asks how you become a good photographer. You take a million terrible pictures. That's how you become a good photographer.
You and I have talked about that before, in fact.
So I had a job where they I would still go do festivals on the weekends and work shows at night sometimes, and they were kind enough, even when I was in a situation where I had the opportunity to buy a new camera and upgrade, they floated me some money until I could pay them back. And so they definitely supported me throughout that process. But it came to a time where I was ready to go. And I came home from work one night, and I was just, I was like, I'm tired of doing this. I really want to make this happen. And my lovely, amazing, awesome, brilliant wife said, Phil, well, you should just quit. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, just quit. She's like, you quit that day job, you're going to have to figure out how to make this work. It's going to put you in a real tight spot. It's like, we got an opportunity right now where I'm graduating medical school and getting ready to start as a physician. We're moving. We moved to Joplin for a couple of years, so it was a time to kind of reset and build everything up. And then we moved back to Tulsa, and I was ready to go. I was ready to do it full time, and had built the clients and had built the contacts, and began to kind of develop the system that we use here with our company here in town, which is, to my knowledge, kind of a unique way to approach it, where one team is responsible for multiple venues in the same city, and we divvy up the work amongst each other. Instead of trying to bid against each other and fight tooth and nail for these jobs, we all try to bring each other up.
And man, that's something. First of all, I can vouch for the fact that Phil's wife is lovely and amazing and awesome. But that's one of the things that I did want to chat with you about, because normally, and one thing that I think Tulsa, our region, does very well is where other cities and regions can be cutthroat. There's maybe not everybody, but a lot of folks want to see that rising tide raise all the ships. And I tell people, and this may be the wrong word, feel free to correct me, I said, Phil kind of has like a collective. And if he's unavailable, you're going to get somebody who's going to give you great shots. And I don't even have to say, hey, send Greg or send Brenda or send... Right. I just reach out to you. How did that come about? Because that's really in the entertainment industry, that's the exact opposite of what we try to do.
It's truly what you're saying. It's the Tulsa way. It's the way that we all support each other and build each other up in this community. I got to a point where I got so busy that I couldn't handle it all by myself. And I knew that if I started telling people, no, I'm already booked, then they're going to go out and get bids, and they're going to find somebody that can do it. And I said, well, instead of that being a situation where we're all bidding against each other and we're devaluing the market as a whole, why don't we all collaborate together? And the guys I work with, Greg Bollinger, Brendan Steves, Adam Koloff, Todd Ruffin, Landon Smothers, our crew is a group of guys that they're not employees of Phil Clarkin Photography. We are a collective where we all value each other's opinion, we respect each other's talent, we share secrets amongst each other. And the ultimate goal is we can overall continue to serve the needs of the clients while maintaining the value of the work that we do. And so that's kind of how I approach it. And when I see other photographers pop up around town that I see as a potential threat, instead of looking at them as a threat, I look at them as a potential partner in the future, and try to have those conversations.
Have another plate at the table. Right. I do love the fact, coming from my side of it, that, and I wish production vendors, and I wish the ushering agent, I wish everybody else took this approach, because when I need some great shots, I don't have to worry, well, BOK Center has this show or Kane's has this show and they're going to trump mine, and it's because some nights every venue has something going on.
Right.
That's happened more than once, where not just the casinos, but Tulsa Theater, you guys shoot there. BOK Center, Osage, I know, casino, you guys shoot there. Everything's going on, and we don't have to worry about that. And I just know, hey, did you talk to Phil? Yes. Okay, somebody's going to come in, and 5 hours later, we're going to get some great shots.
Right.
Again, I wish more folks would do that. Is there ever any... this is a really cool show. This is because I told somebody asked me, it may have been my former supervisor, how they divvy up the work. Like if one show is awesome, and I said, man, all those guys think all the shows are awesome. Like it really is. And it's always worked out where I always felt like anybody coming in was, you guys just really happened to be into the artist I had that night, because we got great shots at the end. And I never was ever punching a clock. Has there ever been a situation though where you guys were all going after?
Yeah, there's unique times for sure. And we're lucky that we're diversified in the situation too, where Greg also works with Tulsa People magazine, and so he has another outlet. Brendan works for multiple radio stations here in town, and so like the night Paul McCartney was here, all three of us wanted to shoot it, and we would show up in the photo pit, and it's the three of us, but we're all representing different entities at the time. But overall, we all just really like to be here. We like to do our job. We like to do what we do. A lot of times people ask me, how was the show? How was the artist? I'm like, I don't really know, because that's not what I was there for. I wasn't listening as a music connoisseur. I'm going through a checklist in my mind. I need these tight shots. I need these wide shots. I need to get every band member. I need to get signage. I need to get the crowd. And those are where my thoughts are. A lot of times when you're in the pit too, as you know, you're in front of the PA mix. Like I'm just catching stage mix. I can't even hear what the singer's saying at half times unless it's what's coming through his wedge back at them, So yeah, it's not a... Yeah, the music does inspire us, but music in general inspires us, and it doesn't have to be an artist that I'm even familiar with to enjoy what we do when we're there.
Can you walk, because this is one of those deals, tell me a day in your life and they're all completely different. I know my approach, I try to go wherever you want to go, get whatever you need to get, you want upstairs, downstairs, whatever. But I've worked on shows where I had to tell people, you're going to be escorted back between 8:03 and 8:04, and you're going to stand on this X, and you're going to get about 30 seconds. Can you give us a standard show night protocol versus one that may have some aspects people don't think about?
Well, sure. Each artist is different. The artists are who specifies that ultimately. On the higher level shows, the shows that would be at BOK Center, pop artists, huge names, stuff like that, they have a whole team of lawyers behind their entire photo agreement and photo protocol. And a lot of times we're in a situation where we may only get 2 songs, and they may be 2 songs from front of house only. So we're 80 plus yards away at the back of BOK Center on a step stool for 2 songs of a pop band that may be 5-6 minutes total.
With 4,000 people in front of you
trying to get the shot. And so it's different every night. Kane's Ballrooms, typically it's first 3 songs in the pit and the rest of the show from the room. Osage, it's fairly wide open as long as we're respectful of the customers and the artists. So yeah, it varies from night to night, and part of that is part of the game that we like to play. It's a set of challenges that our consumers or our fans or people that look at our work aren't even aware of, these constraints that we're put in, but we're forced to create these captivating images that tell a story within these new sets of constraints every night. And so that adds another level of challenge of making it almost a game for us. To be like, yeah, I've got 6 minutes and I'm stuck in the back corner of the room, but by God, I'm going to make this guy look better than anybody else has on the rest of the tour.
You've got 6 minutes. We're not going to tell you what songs they are. We're not going to tell you what the lighting is going to be for that. We're not going to give you any cues for that.
Thankfully, because of YouTube and things like that, we can do some of that research on the front end, and we will. We'll go in and type in Beyonce tour 2025 full show on YouTube, and somebody's held their phone up and taped the whole show, and so you can watch how they come out, if there's pyro, if there's cryo, if there's lasers, whatever there might be getting ready to happen, and kind of be ready for it settings wise, which makes a huge advantage for sure.
Is that because, so full disclosure to anybody listening, once the show starts, Phil and I aren't talking and hanging out or whatever because we're both working. Has technology advanced? Because just before this, we were talking about how I can carry around in a duffel bag everything I need to broadcast a message to the world. Has technology advanced? I mean, are we swapping lenses in mid-song? Are we swapping lighting rigs in mid-song? Or has technology advanced where the camera does... I don't think the camera does most of the work now, but I guess I could be wrong. But
so the way to look at it is you let a 15-year-old drive a Ferrari or you let a NASCAR driver drive a Ferrari, you're going to get different results.
Very true.
So the technology definitely makes the job more efficient, more effective. But knowing how to use the technology and shooting for the edit are so important. Those are things that people don't consider when they're editing things, or when they're shooting things, is that 50% of what you're doing is what you're going to do on the computer. And so you have to control the camera in such a way that's going to give you a file that you're going to be able to edit and post and create the image that you're seeing. So a lot of times people are like, hey, let me look at the back of your camera while you're shooting. Like, you don't want to look at the back of your camera while I'm shooting. Like, I'm making the data I need to make the photo that I need in post. But as far as the technology taking over parts of the job, the technology will never capture the human eye, the emotion. AI doesn't feel those things, you know. And,
yeah.
5 photographers can stand shoulder to shoulder with the same exact camera and look at the same exact thing and take 5 completely different
shows.
Yeah.
What's the biggest delay? Let me set up this question. And all the shows you've done with me, you're shooting. We normally start at 8 to 8:10. I have the finished photos by like 11 or 11:30. So how much time goes into editing, and what's the biggest gap? And I say this, I don't know if he's ever going to listen, but I'm going to give him a hard time. You know our buddy Tom Harris, who takes a lot of photos. I saw where Tom's putting up Mile Zero festival pics from last year because he had surgery and he's so far behind in the editing process. So how long does your normal editing take, and what's the biggest gap you've had between shot and publication?
Well, that's one of the things that sets my team apart from many other photography teams, is that we make it a priority to deliver product by the same night. So
we get spoiled, by the way, as your client. We get spoiled that way.
And that's important to us because I've always had the philosophy that concert photos matter for about 48 hours after the event, and then they're going to matter again in 30 years. But that time period in between, nobody cares. And so unless you capture the feeling that people are still feeling when they come out of that show, you're not going to get the engagement you would normally get on social media, the likes, the shares, the comments, the things that people do a week later, because they've already moved on mentally. But when it's still fresh, and it's especially, BOK Center, their policy is the photos have to be delivered before the shows end, because they post them as people walk out the door. They've been sitting in a room for 2-3 hours with spotty cell phone reception or whatever. They walk out of a concert, they pull their phone out, they open up Facebook, and boom, there's a picture of the show they were just at.
And they're in the mood
very
to
likely
share it.
to engage with that. Right. So as far as like a gap in between, we really try not to have more than a day or so, unless something goes terribly wrong. In years past, when the technology was older and I was less familiar with things, a music festival or something where you're there for 3 or 4 days, it would take months to go through all that. But the technology's gotten to a way, and we've developed a process in using the technology where we're super efficient at it, and we're able to cull and sort and edit. But just for those photo nerds at home, we don't use presets, we don't use filters, we don't use masks. Everything we do is shot in RAW, in full manual, and it's edited in Lightroom uniquely for each photo shoot. And we take pride in that too. We're not creating cookie cutter, mass produced content. Like, this is content that is specific to an event.
I know with, again, the shows you shot for me, And now this is a like an evening where there's one artist playing that night. You come and I get 25 or 30 shots, and I've told higher ups, I said, we don't settle on a specific number because we may have a couple more good ones, we may have a couple less. Has there ever, do you find yourself going, oh, that's enough? Or is Phil Clarkin the type who's like, oh man, I could turn this one into that's something special too?
That's the thing too, is you lose people's attention when you throw a whole bunch of very similar things at them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're not going to look at them all. And so I tell my guys, I take note of that myself. It's really important to shoot percentage-wise the fewest frames possible with the largest number of keepers possible, and make sure that each of the final edits that you turn out is a unique image. Like, you don't need 3 photos of somebody slightly turning each time, or a black and white and a color version of the same thing. Like, you're going to lose people's interest with that kind of stuff. Make each photo unique, make it captivating, and move on. Pick the best one. Don't sit there and waller about it. I mean, that's one of the things when you're looking at it, you're like, which one? You're like, should I use this one or this one? Like your brain and your eyes should know right away, like, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And like, you should make those decisions with confidence and with the idea that you're going to put out an album that is all, each individual image represents a unique moment.
Have you, and by the way, faithful 11% podcast listeners, this is fantastic information for anyone in the music industry, because I've worked with venues and beat my head against a wall saying posting pictures on Wednesday of a concert that happened last Friday isn't going to do anybody any good. Not the artists, not us, not the folks who follow us. And there is no better feeling. I told my daughter went to Billie Eilish the other night. She said, this might be the best show I've ever seen. And I said, if you're like me, the last show you saw was the best show you've ever seen. Because when you're leaving, you're in that, and you do want to share. And as much as we love the artistic aspect and the connection that we have with music, there's still a business behind everything, and you need to have to focus on that. So aside from your Joan Jetts or your people who don't allow photography at all,
sure.
What's is the most restrictive front of house for 2 songs? Or
yeah, typically. I
mean, because people don't understand the front of house where everything's mixed and console. You don't even have a lot of room to move there. You're really standing in one spot. You may be able to have 6 inches one way or the other, but you don't have.
And as somebody like me, I really focus on things like symmetry and balance, and you don't get to choose where you stand a lot of times. Yeah. So that drives me crazy too. It's like, I'm not centered up on the stage. I'm offset to the right, and guy's got a cowboy hat on like this, so there's just a black shadow over his face. Like, yeah, that's about the most restrictive. There's been a few times where we've only gotten one song, that's happened, or song 1 and song 3, that's happened. There's been a show I remember where we had to shoot from event level, which is like where all the concession stands are at BOK Center, so we weren't even on the floor, we were up above the 100 section of seats. So yeah, it's tough, but like I said, having the gear to handle it, the confidence to handle it, and looking at it as a fun challenge instead of being intimidated by it, it's really the key to figuring that out. So,
and because I've gone back and said, hey, I want one of these blown up and framed. Like, how much I love Phil Clarkin's work. What was your first big artist or performer, whatever, that said, hey, I want to use one of yours? And I will tell you, I think I mentioned it earlier, to this day, and it's been several years, that Foo Fighters shot that they used on their website, they may still be using, but where you're just at foot level of Grohl, and it's a wonderful shot, that, I'm not going to say it's my favorite, it's in my top 5. And I know the Billy Joe Armstrong shot we talked about earlier, but who was the first to say,
well,
hey, can we use that?
Big artist is a relative term, because my taste in music versus the general population's love for a musician may vary. With some of the biggest honors I remember early on were from a band called Humphreys McGee, who allowed me to be on stage. They allowed me to have access to the band, to shoot the full show, to come to multiple shows at the run. And they used my photos for their albums and their live recordings and things like that, and definitely showed a level of respect early on that always stuck with me for sure. But since then, I've had people like Fleetwood Mac. I've been official photographer for Hall & Oates before. Some huge names out there, and it's weird because it's kind of like being that musician that gets to play in front of 100,000 people one night, and then they play a bar gig the next night, because that's how that works. Sometimes it's like I don't know. The bigger honors to me are the relationships that I build with people like you, and with people like the Rogers, and with the Fitzgeralds, and people who support my work and are willing to trust me, and to know, like, we don't have to keep an eye on this guy. He's going to follow the rules. He's going to not bother the artist. He's going to be where he's supposed to. Like, to me, that's the bigger honor than anything, is a level of trust. BOK Center giving me a badge that opens doors. Like, I can go where I want to because they know that I'm not going to cause a problem. And then,
exactly right.
Like, to me, that's the biggest takeaway from all of it, is the relationships, for sure.
And you mentioned Chad and Hunter. So you've been shooting at Cain's for 15 years? Was 2010 your first? Is that what I read? In my Phil Clarkin research?
Yeah, it may have been even earlier than that. I can't remember. I remember I got my first photo pass at Cain's Ballroom via a band called Split Lip Rayfield from Wichita. They had become friends of ours because I helped with this event at a music festival called Chomp Down. That's a big community breakfast feed that was started by a friend of ours named Rabbit, who passed away from cancer. And the Split Lip guys knew Rabbit as well, and had donated items when he was in the hospital for us to raise money for him and things like that. So we became friends, and they were opening for Les Claypool. And I hit him up and was just like, hey, I'll be in town for the show. I'd love to just get the opportunity. And so shot there, took a bunch of horrible photos. There's like one usable Claypool photo.
As you do when you're starting out.
All of it, right. Learned a lot about Cain's being one of the more difficult rooms to shoot as a photographer. But becoming the official photographer didn't happen until a few years ago. We got lucky enough during the terrible time of the shutdown for the music industry and the pandemic. We got asked to produce a show from Cain's that was called Live from Cain's. That was syndicated through NPR. It was a radio show that had a video component to it as well. And so we were live streaming. We were putting shows on at Cain's without an audience, and picking unique places to set the bands up and things like that. And Julie Watson was the producer on that she gave us the opportunity to do that. But through that, built a relationship with Chad and Hunter, and approached them and was just like, hey, you've had official guys in the past or whatever, but we would really like to cover everything for you guys. You tell us what works for you, and that's how we present it to all our clients. Is like, how can we fit into your business model? How can we make this all work? And we came up with a way, and we spend more nights in Cain's Ballroom than any other venue in town. Luckily, it's never lost on us to pull in that backstage and walk in that door and see the signatures in the hallway and all that stuff. Like, it's incredible every time, and feel super lucky to have that gig, for sure.
Man, and you're probably aware, because we talked about this, assuming that my episode with Chad and Hunter comes out before this one. Chad and Hunter, they weren't even going after Cain's. They were looking at a different venue, and then that Sunday night they heard about it, and they went Tuesday and Thursday. They had the keys. Best thing that could have happened to that venue.
Oh, absolutely. They saved it.
I tell people, Larry Schaefer and Chad and Hunter Rogers, best thing that ever could have happened to Cain's, sure. And that's why it is what it is. But you mentioned Cain's can be a little bit of a difficult room. Is it because it's an older building? Is it because the ceilings are lower?
There's a few factors in play there. The shape of the stage is a thing. It's a problem they even have from a production standpoint.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of bands that can't play there because they can't fit on the stage.
Can't fit everybody on there.
Right. There's a big metal bar that runs right down from the ceiling, dead center of that Home of Bob Wills sign, and connects to the wall. It's a structural beam, and it limits the overall stage height. And so, because of that, the lights in the back are tucked into that kind of cove. The lights in the front, they have to be aimed, and there has to be somebody that knows what they're doing behind the system. But it's LED lighting. The technology has changed. It's not the old parquet and incandescent situation anymore. And with LED lighting, we get a lot of the magenta colors, the dark blue colors, things like that. And the camera sensors don't know what to do with those colors. You lose the details in the faces. You lose the ability to bring things out in post to find skin tones and things like that. So learning a room like that and understanding that kind of lighting system it makes you a really good photographer, because it's not easy. There's a lot of people that come in there and they think, oh, it's Kane's Ballroom, these photos will look great. And like, well, that's not always the case. It's one of those things you've got to learn the room and the lights, and it also helps to have a relationship with the lighting guy and work with them.
Oh yeah, to know what's going on.
That all takes time.
What room in Tulsa is the easiest? Not the best. I'm not going to ask you to do that,
right.
But the easiest. I would assume be okay because it's newer. And...
Sure, it's mostly has to do with the production.
Mm-hmm.
Cameras love light.
Osage.
Yeah, well, Osage is super easy. The LED wall in Osage is set to the right scan rate to where it doesn't mess with our cameras. The lighting in there is beautiful. The stage is easy to access. Yeah, all of it's great. BOK is the same way, where cameras love light, and there's a lot of light in there to play with. The access at BOK is a lot more difficult a lot of times, whereas Osage has an advantage there. I tell people all the time that they're aspiring concert photographer, and they're like, I want to get good, I want to shoot Canes, I want to do this and do that. Tell them, go shoot at the Mercury Lounge. Go shoot at some of these small little bars that have just a couple lights, and they might revolve in color and they don't move with the show or anything. If you can take a good picture there, you'll be just fine in these big rooms. But,
or the lights might not revolve at all.
Or they might not work at all. Right.
Man, and I will tell you, how cool is it that in Tulsa we have a Mercury, and we have a Canes, and we have a Tulsa Theater, and we have...
There's 7 nights a week. There's something worth going out to see music-wise in this town. There's not many towns that can say that. There's lots of towns that can say they have live music 7 nights a week, but it's not worth getting off the couch for. In Tulsa, it is.
And they're all within... We're sitting at Phil's studio. They're all within 15 minutes.
Right. Everything.
I mean, literally, you can go 7 nights a week. Sometimes hit the same venue 3 or 4 nights in a row and get something completely different.
We joke about having double and triple headers some nights, where that's the plan. I've got the 6 o'clock show, I've got a real show this time, and then there's a late night here, and I'm going to do them all.
I know you and I have talked about, because when I was at Osage, we always started at 8.
Right.
In no small part, our model is based on folks finishing about 9:30
Sure.
and heading up and doing that. But you and I have joked, because we start on time, you'd still have time, because it'd be okay headliner and going on stage till 10:30, and you may be able to hit Canes between both of them.
I've done it.
And I still, just for the record, people, still got my pictures by 11:15 that night. So don't ever doubt that it was
sitting in my truck editing in between gigs a lot of times.
Easiest venue in North America, because I know you've shot it a bunch coast to coast.
Man, it's hard to determine what's easy and hard, because so much of it is dependent on the band, the production, and the access. Those are the things that drive your photography, and that's what sets photographers apart. There's a lot of people that they kind of get to this level of we're all really good, and the people that get above that level are the people that get the access. You get the opportunity to shoot those intimate moments with the band, to be on stage with the band, to go in the pit whenever you want, not just the first 3 songs, to go in front of house and get elevated above the crowd. That kind of access is what sets your photos apart. And so I would say the easiest venue to shoot is the one where you're the most respected in and given the most access.
So and Osage.
That one, absolutely. One moment I'll never forget is that first show you and I worked together at BOK Center. Being the house photographer at BOK Center, I still had to follow all these very strict rules that are set forth by the media. This being your show and me working for you, it was a different situation. You were like, Phil, just get up there. And I'll never forget, it's sound check, and I was crouched down behind the drum set, and they're playing Riders on the Storm, and it kind of fades out, and Dinsmore does that drum fill, comes back into it, and I got chills from head to toe and almost fell over backwards off the stage. That moment is one that will hang with me for the rest of my life, but it's because of access.
But also keep in mind the access is given because you and your whole collective, you guys are able to capture that emotion.
It's an earned thing.
And I don't know, of all the concerts I've been to, 30 years, all the photos I've seen, I don't know how it's done. When they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, but I think a concert picture is almost worth 1,000 emotions. And to the point where years later, when I talk about Billy Joe Armstrong and Green Day, everybody listening to this has the exact same shot in their mind. And I don't know, with that shot specifically, were you waiting? Do you just snap and then, or are you like, oh, he's about to take a step now, and that's a different pose? That's the pose that I'm looking for.
So there's a couple ways to approach concert photography. There's what we call the pray and spray method, where people just stick the camera up and they rattle them off and they hope they get it.
So that's like 98%.
Right,
that's every fan going. That's like 98%.
People do it that way. But like I was telling you earlier in the interview, I come from the film world originally, and so we shot with intention back then because it costs money every time you pull the shutter, right? So having those kind of principles to start with, I think, helped me. And that idea of shooting 2 or 3 shows a night, shooting every night or whatever, you can't imagine what the back end of the data management of that is. And so if I go out and shoot 5,000 frames at a show, I still have to do something with all those. I got to store them, I got to dump them, I got to look at them. But if I shoot 300 and I get the same amount of keepers, then I'm saving myself money and time in the long run, And so that's my intention with shooting, is especially with watching a light show and watching a lighting director and stuff, you can learn things like, there's this look on the verse, this look on the chorus, or maybe they're going to give this look and go back, and then they're going to give it again. So I got my settings in that first time. Now they got to the other look, but here it comes again. I'm ready this time. Or the lights are panning across the crowd. Now I can get the crowd lit up, and it's an anticipation thing. And so not just shooting free will. You won't get very far doing it that way. You really got to kind of have a plan and shoot with intention.
I will tell you the challenge that I'm seeing in terms of shooting with intention, and obviously present company is excluded here. I'm seeing a lot of younger folks who are very adept on the technical side, but maybe not the artistic side. And there's 2 types of people at a concert. There's one, you're listening to the song, even if you're not familiar with the artist, but you can feel, oh man, a solo is coming up, here we're about to hit it. And there's the folks who don't quite get that. And it seems to me that everyone that's under the Phil Clarkin banner gets that. And I mean, my own staff, I've had to say, hey, man, the technical side is strong, but you got to have that artistic side if you want our folks to leave with that experience. And I would think even more so if you're trying to capture that experience.
It's really important, actually. I think my background being a washed-up musician has a lot to do with that. I can anticipate bridge, chords, verse, that kind of stuff, unless stuff's just really avant-garde and weird. Most of the time I know where we're at musically. Some of the advantage of that was when we were doing the Live from Kane's thing, because I was the director, and so I'm on a headset and I'm calling the camera shots, right? And so I'm ready, get ready, camera 1, we're about to go guitar solo, or there's about to be a solo, I don't know who it is, but everybody be on their toes, or whatever it might be, but it comes from understanding the music, and my guys all have that level of musical feel, even if they're not musicians. They've been around it long enough and have been experienced enough that they know what's going on stage.
Have you had any shows, because as a promoter I certainly have, where, and not very many, but there have been a couple that it was almost like a Frank Zappa, I'm asking myself, what the hell is going on here?
Oh, yeah.
Is this a song? Is it the same song? Is it a different song? And in that situation, I'm assuming your instincts, you got to go with them, and what's going to feel right.
Yeah. There's a lot, especially jam bands and stuff, where you're 15 minutes into a song, are we still in the same song? What's going on here? And then some really technical music too. There's just it's, above your thinking capacity. But in those moments, you just find other ways to dissect it.
Do you find rock, which I would say is a more predictable genre, is easier to shoot than jazz, which from my experience tends to be more unpredictable?
Yeah,
or does
for
that
sure.
unpredictability help?
From a couple aspects. A lot of it is just because of the emotion conveyed.
Mm-hmm.
A rock musician, they give it to you. Especially, there's certain ones that really ham it up. I've had Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley both get right in my camera. The lead singer of Ghost wrapped his hands around my lens one night. It's like those kind of moments, you get that from rock and roll. They're not scared to give it to the camera a little bit, whereas a jazz guy, he's looking at the floor the whole time, the light's blue, and he's got his face down, and whatever else.
I remember one of the first shows I ever did, probably with Larry Schaefer, this is 20 some odd years ago. George Thorogood made it very clear, cameras are not allowed, no pictures are allowed, please don't take any pictures. And if he saw a camera, he was there in front of it posing for it.
Right.
He was getting down and ready. And I thought, okay, well that goes what it chooses to mean. But yeah, that for me, like I said, rock, country. Your more mainstream genres are a little more predictable, and I don't mean predictable in a bad way at all.
Right. No, even lighting wise.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. You know when to expect. How you doing tonight? They're going to hit crowd abuse.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to
right.
blind them.
Are the we call them ACLs, aircraft lights? Mm-hmm. Are those a photographer's enemy, or do they?
No, they're your friend if you know what to do with them. You gotta adjust your f-stop a little bit and be ready for it so that you don't overexpose. But that's the moment a lot of times when the room's lit up enough that you can get that wide depth shot where you see all the people.
The crowd there.
Right.
I know I've worked shows where I've had to tell the lighting guy, hey man, because of sales, you may want to lay off those crowd lights.
No, there's been some shows where
is there a challenge in trying to make a room feel full in a picture when it's not?
Yeah, that's part of the game too. Is you don't want to shed any negative light on the event.
Exactly right.
You don't want to make the room look empty. So yeah, there's photos a lot of times like that's a great shot, but I'm not going to put that in the album. Or here's the edge of the crowd. I'm going to walk right up behind the edge of the densest part of the crowd and shoot from here. And same with the lights and stuff. I've had shows where the promoter was very adamant on you're only shooting from the photo pit. Just shoot from the photo pit. And they're saying that because they don't want me further back in the room showing
exactly
all the empty
right.
seats,
Here's a question, and I tried to do the math on this, but I truly don't know if it's thousands or tens of thousands. How many Phil Clarkin, and by this I mean anyone shooting under Phil's banner, how many Phil Clarkin shots would you say are used that aren't credited or paid for?
It happens.
16 million, 25 million? Because I know there's a bunch.
It's a big number. I try not to get too hung up on it. A lot of photographers do. I look at it as, number one, we were paid to create the image to begin with. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is not the correct usage or the correct payment for the image, but somebody liked it enough that they want it to live on. They want other people to see it. It represents them well. If somebody's blatantly misusing the image, if they're blatantly profiting off of it in some way, yeah, I'm gonna talk to them about it. But overall, especially the Tulsa musicians, they're all really good at making sure they tag you when they post the photo and things like that.
I do think the industry has gotten better.
For sure.
Saying, hey, here's the credit. I know in my venues, especially if pictures are publicly hung, I insist that the credit be.
You're a rare instance in that, and I truly appreciate that.
Oh, I mean, of course. But I've noticed that more venues on social media seem to be publicly crediting, which is nice.
Yeah, and I think that comes a lot from photographers pushing back on that. That's been kind of a thing. There's a lot of people in town that are real good about, even my fans, my friends, or whatever. And like if my photo's up and it's not credited, they'll comment on it. The photo by Phil Clarkin or whatever.
Until somebody downloads it or reshares it.
Right. Yeah, but ultimately, if my image is living on in some way, I feel like that's a good thing.
Man, I've always thought, there were two approaches. And I call them the Metallica or Dave Matthews approach. And because anybody listening to this is going to be old enough to remember Napster. Remember when that whole deal blew up and Metallica came out?
I was a Napster user.
Man, who wasn't? I was a LimeWire user.
I used LimeWire
but
as well.
I defaulted to Napster. Yeah. In the early days, if there are any young ones listening, of the internet, file sharing programs became the norm. And you could go to LimeWire or Napster and download your songs without paying for them. Which
was technically illegal.
Yes, was technically illegal, but 99.9% of the people on the planet did this. And then the first artist publicly to make a stand, Metallica came out, litigated some things, wound up getting Napster shut down. And I always thought that the approach should have been the opposite. In the case of Dave Matthews Band, Dave was one of the very few artists to go from theaters to stadiums, or maybe smaller, big arenas very quickly, because he said, man, record it.
Yeah.
And I've, even these days, Steve Earle will tell you, everybody's recording anything anyway, record and use. I don't care about that anymore. But I know with photography, it seems, I've seen pictures of yours that I know were properly credited the next day on a different site without any source listing whatsoever. And I'm the guy who goes in and says, hey, good job, Phil Clarkin. Let's keep it. But is it getting any better, or is it just as bad as it's always been?
It's definitely getting better. It's almost coming to where people understand it more too now, and so I think that's part of it. But there's a lot of people out there that when they see me or one of my guys at the show, they intentionally don't take photos because they plan on reposting our photos the next day or whatever, you know. And I take that as a level of pride for sure.
And full disclosure, before we even started recording, I asked Phil, I said, hey, did you shoot one of the two of these shows? Because I was looking for photos from him. He said, yeah, they are. So I know I can go and hunt them down on your page and share them from that. But so if Phil had to come up with a top 3, 4, 5 shows, and I will tell you, being an Humphreys McGee fan, like that's as cool to me as Paul McCartney, and I mean that literally. What would your personal 5 be? Not necessarily, and if they are super global blockbusters, cool. But I'm looking for your.
Well, I mean, I'm sure the list changes
every day. Yeah, it'll be different 5 tomorrow.
But 5 that come to mind for sure. Fish at Madison Square Garden was a moment I'll never forget. Being a huge Fish fan. The shows were postponed because it was during the pandemic, and so it was the 4 nights. That would have been their New Year's Eve run, but they ended up having them in April. So it's the first time in New York with my wife and friend, and like enjoying the city, doing all this stuff. Beautiful April weekend, you know. And with Fish, they're very strict on their photo policy.
Oh yes, they are.
I only got to shoot the first show. Only got to shoot the first 15 minutes of the first show. Was escorted in, escorted out.
Did the escort stay with you the whole time?
They stayed adjacent to the photo pit.
Yeah.
So we shot from the photo pit. They escort you out, you know, like 30 minutes before the band comes on. You just stand out there and wait. They finally come on. You get your 15 minutes because with Fish, it can't be by the song because, of course, it could be all over the board.
Yeah, maybe just be one song.
Right. And then you're out. But I'll never forget walking down those hallways and being like, man, I remember seeing these hallways and like the song remains the same.
Exactly right.
You know, Miles Davis, the Beatles, like everybody's walked these hallways. It was a moment.
You're literally walking in. And when the Beatles were the Beatles, not afterwards.
Right.
Yeah.
Another big one was the first time I got to shoot Red Rocks. I was there with Humphreys McGee and their stage manager, who's a near dear friend of mine, Robbie Williams, got me a parking situation that was close to the backstage entrance. We pulled in.
Congratulations on that.
We parked at the gift shop, if you know what that means. Right. So my wife and I, it's the middle of the afternoon, we had brought actually a speaker with us that the band had forgot at a music festival that I was at earlier a couple months ago, and I picked it up for them. And super high dollar thing that they were nervous about or whatever, but got a hold of all that, and Robbie says we'll send a van down to pick you up and he'll bring you up, and we walk in and Robbie meets us at the door and we're talking, good to see you guys, big hugs, all that, and we're walking down the hallways and through the tunnels and this, that, and the other, and like I'm just talking to Robbie the whole time. There'd been a whole lot that had happened, we were catching up, and I stopped and I looked up, and we're standing on the middle of the deck at Red Rocks after they had cleared all the tourists out. So it's completely empty venue, beautiful Colorado bluebird skies, and I'm standing dead center as I look up for my first time to ever see Red Rocks. Was a surprise.
That's an aha moment, man.
Right. Yeah. So that was a huge one. Getting to shoot Tool for the first time was a big one for me. Just because it's a band that has stuck with me for my entire life. I've been a fan since I was a young kid. And my wife and I went actually on our first out-of-town date ever as a young dating couple when we were 18, 19 years old. We went and saw Tool in Wichita.
Now, is that because she's a Tool fan or because she loves Phil Clarkin?
Both, actually.
Okay, nice.
Luckily enough, her and I, one of the first things we bonded over was our love for music.
Oh, fantastic.
And we were into a lot of the same music. But yeah, Tool notoriously didn't allow photography for years and years and years. That was kind of their thing. And then they finally decided one tour after I became the house would be okay. But yeah, we'll give you one song from the photo pit. And we walked out and they had all kinds of stuff in the way. And it was terrible lighting. It was super difficult, and I made it work. But being a fanboy moment for sure. And on that regard, the time I got to shoot Elton John was the same thing.
Was that Goodbye Yellow? Was that here?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was a great show.
It was, and it was I was one of the only photographers approved for the event, and they gave us 2 songs from the front and then 1 song from the back. And I'll never forget, they didn't have a barricade or anything, so it was like belly up to this low stage as these people are all sitting or whatever, and like I'd take this moment where it's like he's playing. I'm literally the closest person in the room to Elton John, like he's right there, you know, and I'm taking the photos, and like my jaws dropped, and I'm just dumbfounded watching. It's like, hold on, start shooting again. You got 2 songs to make this happen, get going. And it was one of those moments too where I'm not often starstruck, but it was definitely.
Is there a bunch of challenges when somebody's sitting behind a piano?
Yeah,
that's incredibly reflective of all the light.
Right, and he's got the big crazy glasses on. Like
he's hidden behind his outfit.
Yeah, a whole lot going on there. Piano shots are difficult unless you're on stage level where you can kind of get that downward and get the hands and everything. You're obstructed so much. It depends where they're leaning and what they're doing, and it depends where they stick you. You're either shooting at their back or directly to their side, or with the piano in the way and their little head sticking above it.
Across the earth.
Yeah. It's one of the more difficult instruments to shoot for sure.
Man, that was a fantastic. And I will tell you something they don't tell you that Phil kind of referenced. I found out. I think my first Red Rock show was Tom Petty. Nobody tells you a 53-foot truck can't fit in Red Rocks. So your production is going to have to be bobtailed down, which means your production bill is going to be 3 times what it normally is.
Now the same way with Madison Square Garden. They had to forklift up 3 stories of spiral concrete ramp.
People think you can just pull the bus in.
Right,
that's not
They're talking about the trucks, and they're like, yeah, we had to stage them all through Manhattan and be like, all right, you come another block, you do this, you do that, just to get everybody in and out in the right revolution. It's like, I couldn't imagine that.
It is, I will tell you, the biggest discrepancy, and this isn't good, by the way, I'm not pro, I'm just saying the facts. Willie Nelson in Tulsa, my labor bill, probably a couple grand for a 2-truck show. In New York City, a union show, it's about $55,000. I mean, different markets, where the prices were adjusted.
The numbers all work.
It's Willie, everybody's doing it. But it was one of those things that nobody tells you about.
Yeah.
And I've always assumed Red Rocks, maybe the Gorge of George, those venues were easy to shoot. I always thought Hollywood Bowl would be easy to shoot photography, but I've had a couple people say it's difficult, and I'm not sure if it's the lighting or I don't know.
The lighting and stage shape have so much to do with it, and the conditions you're put in. Red Rocks is easy to shoot because it's beautiful, but it's really hard to shoot because you're at a mile altitude and you're carrying a 40-pound pack and you're going up these stairs to get the big wide shot, and you're back down at the stage and it's up and down. Last time I was there with Humphreys, in one night, I went to the very top and back down 8 times. I remember distinctly with gear on.
Did you? And I'm not kidding. Did you have like one of those little mini oxygen things?
I didn't there at that show. I had them at my RV. Luckily, after the show was over, I remember laying in bed just huffing on it. Yeah. But just because a venue's beautiful or the lighting's great or whatever, there's a lot more factors that go into what make a shoot difficult or easy.
So if we can talk briefly about. I know what I think the most difficult shoot is, but I'm also looking purely in terms of steps taken over a 4-day run at a stadium that wasn't designed with concerts in mind. What's been the most difficult shoot that you've had?
It's such a relative term. If we talk from a physical standpoint or we talk from a photography standpoint.
Let's talk from a physical to start off with. And so in my mind, I'm guessing, I know Boys from Oklahoma, you will put in some miles.
That one was brutal. I did 29.5 miles inside Boone Pickens Stadium over 4 days with my gear pack that weighs from 30 to 40 pounds.
And it's not just the steps, because it wasn't just an evening with. You had a whole slew of artists that you had to line up.
Yeah, and that's one thing that makes it more difficult. That's one thing that makes Osage great, is like we don't have to deal with 4 openers starting at varying times or whatever. And when you're shooting with intention for 4 or 5 full shows for 4 days, it was physically, it exhausted me to the point that I was nearly in the hospital afterwards.
Man,
to be honest with you.
I was just talking with Sean S. Baker, our last podcast guest this morning, and I said, in our society, we push working so hard that the line between overworked and medical grade exhaustion gets blurred.
Yeah, totally. Especially in the concert world.
And I think it was Katie Dale and I were chatting maybe afterwards, and I said, did Phil survive Boys from Oklahoma? And we both kind of laughed, but we're like, man, we hadn't heard anything bad.
Right.
And you and your whole crew was just, it wasn't just, I mean, it was, everybody was all over all the time.
Yeah,
and you're going upstairs and downstairs. And
that's the other thing too, is when I'm at something like that, the rest of the guys I'm working with, if they're not there, they're doing everything else in Tulsa, But yeah, no, I came home from that and it went really well from a photography standpoint. I got huge traffic, huge numbers, thousands and thousands of shares, tons of new followers. I had some great FaceTime with the band members and, became closer with them. All of that was great, but it was literally over a week after I came back that even Greg didn't hear from me. I was in bed.
You just had to hibernate a little bit and let your body recuperate.
Yeah. The
funny part about Boys, you can appreciate this because you know these guys. February of last year, maybe it was December the year before, but before they'd announced Boys from Oklahoma, right after Cross Canadian had changed their logo on social media and everybody started the buzz.
Right.
I had lunch with Roger Ray and John Cooper. And three of us, we're like, what is going on? And the one thing we all agreed on is that we knew it wasn't going to be a reunion. They were never going to get back together. That was not going to happen.
Right,
maybe it's something legal. Maybe Cody had bought the name or whatever. And then like 2 weeks later, they announced that it was going to happen. And that's turned into its own. I don't think they're going to do 4 nights, but it's...
Well, it's turned into a festival in Stillwater, but it's also turned into a package. They're doing
it's a tour. Yeah, it's turned into something that the demand is there. So let me ask you this. We talked about most physically demanding. Do you have a recall of the most, in terms of the shot you get, the most demanding? Is there a one?
Yeah, one instance that comes to mind, it's not necessarily the most difficult, but maybe the most physically demanding photo shot that I used to have to take. Pre-drones, or they were around, but they weren't really the go-to. When we would work a big event, or even just stuff around Tulsa, there's a lot of aerial photography from helicopters. And I love to fly. I was really close with a pilot here in town, Chuck, God rest his soul, and got to do some really cool shoots. But they would block out an hour plus after the aerial photo at Wakarusa because they knew I was going to go lay on the concrete floor and try not to die because I have severe motion sickness.
Oh Lord!
And I got to where I would have the scopolamine patches and things like that, and would still. Take a little while to bounce back from it, but before the scopolamine patches, it would be like I knew what I was getting into. I knew what we were doing. Right. I'm the guy, but oh my God, here we go. And I would get off and be spinning and dizzy and throwing up and the whole thing for an hour or so, and that was just planned in my schedule that Phil's going to go deal with this after the photo shoot, but we got to get the shot.
But we got to get the.
And that was one of the photos. Actually, one of my helicopter photos was like the photo that solidified my relationship with the production company that put on the festival, and where I became the lead and all that was because of one of those photos. So it's worth it.
So it was worth it.
Yeah.
I know you and I have talked about this, and I think, and for people listening, Greg Bollinger is here doing some work too. I think Greg and I talked about this, but there have been issues where we've had to talk about when you're shooting and there isn't a barricade, and it's not Dionne Warwick or somebody low key. Have you ever had I've seen you guys get beat up, what I'm saying, trying to get some shots. Have you ever had anything where like the equipment was damaged or you just couldn't get the shot because somebody's jostling up against you the whole time?
There's definitely difficult situations like that. I've shot the band Guar, and
Lord.
I'm in a photo pit and trying not to get the fake blood and other fluids all over my equipment and gear, and timing things out where I'm watching them. I can see the stagehand hook the hose to the pump, like I know it's coming, kind of thing. I've had camera equipment fail. Late night in the Ozarks at music festivals, you're gonna have a camera failure of some kind. It's gonna happen. The humidity, the dust, the temperatures, the way you handle your equipment. Maybe even your frame of mind after day 4 or whatever, like something's gonna fail on you, and that's what you learn real quick is if you don't have backups, if you don't have another plan, if you don't have another way to get the shot, then that's where you're gonna fail, and that's the part that's not acceptable. The tools failing and the conditions failing and your access failing and all those things can fail, but ultimately you have to figure out how to get what you were there to get.
You still have to get the shot.
Even within those constraints, yeah.
A couple more questions before we shift to the final five.
So Andrew down here mixing the new Johnny Mullinax.
Who, by the way, is my money's on to be the next guy to break out of Tulsa.
Oh, he's coming.
I mean,
he's
already on his way.
Do not talk about the new single coming out December 5th on
Please do not spread it. Do not let everybody know that it's dropping.
Johnny Mullinax's new single.
It's hush hush, and that reminds me I need to go and post something about it. A couple questions, real quick. So, and we'll use the Foo Fighters for example. Hey, this is a great shot, because most of the time, the last level you and I were working with, on the casino level, artists weren't saying, hey, we want approval, we want to see them afterwards. I would tell them, man, if they want to, by all means, they should.
There's some artists that do, but not typically.
When somebody wants to use your shot, is that, hey, man, as long as it's credited, is it a deal where...
Not really.
Is there a licensing issue? How does that work?
So the way to look at the art that we create is that unless a client pays for and specifically requests access to the full rights of the image, I maintain the copyright. Mm-hmm. So even when you hired me for a show, I created photos that I maintain the copyright for, and what you're paying me for is a license.
The right to use
the product, mm-hmm. right? And so if a band reaches out, it's the same thing. Like, what is your intended usage of the image? Like, is it going to be, one-time use on a little back page thing, or you going to print it on T-shirts and sell 1 million of them? Because those are two totally different things.
Exactly right.
You figure out their intention, and you come up. And like I said, I always like to work with my clients, like, what works best for you? And that's how I approach the bands too, is like, what makes sense in this case? Because like Barry Manilow licensed one of my photos for a calendar one year. Like, that usage versus say the Fleetwood Mac, where it was going to be published in the largest music publication in Europe, were two totally different things.
Exactly right.
And so we talk about it and we figure out what makes sense for everybody. But yeah, it's definitely a licensed use of the image, and I still maintain the copyright.
Has there ever been a situation where you've denied, and you don't have to go into details? You said, no, I'd prefer not.
There's been some clients that I've stopped working with because what they have demanded or requested from me, I felt was not worth the value of what they were willing to pay for. I'm willing to do anything if the money reflects the value of the work that's done. So if you want to solely own my work and me never be able to even look at it again, we can arrange that. But it's gonna be a comma in the check, and we're gonna talk about.
You're open for discussion on anything.
Right. I'll do anything.
You'll have a conversation.
I've shot everybody from every political spectrum, and it's not about what I like. It's not about my taste. I'm a documentarian. I'm an image creator. The money I make is for my abilities to use my tools, not for my political affiliations or beliefs or whatever.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
The funny part is, I think the biggest mistake that folks in multiple roles in our industry do, and I've had to go in and educate venues that have asked me to come in, and I said, this isn't about what you like.
Right.
This is about what the market wants,
right.
What people want to see. And I've had artists that were controversial, and I've told the decision makers, yes, they are, but the audience knows that. That's what they want.
Right.
I've had folks come out and we have a morals clause in most of our agreements, so if somebody were to do something reprehensible, we would be able to back out of the show.
I'll never forget the conversation you had to have with Ted Nugent and how respectful he was in that situation.
I will tell you, so if you're listening, because I don't think they'd mind us sharing the story, Ted had a headdress. This was at Osage Casino. And Ted had a headdress he had on stage that he had it from time to time put on during the show. And I got a text from someone saying, quote, tell Ted he can't do that. And I said, that's not how Ted Nugent works. I'm not going to tell Ted anything. But I will go and have a conversation with him and explain to him, hey, this isn't our tribal regalia. This isn't our headdress. Is there any way you could maybe abstain from doing that as a sign of respect for the tribe? And I don't know if Ted cared for the decision, but he did respect it. And he said, man, I don't necessarily want to, but yeah, I will. Not only did he not wear it, he took it off stage and put it back on the bus for us. And I told him, I said, man, truth be told, I'm on your side of the fence on this. I get it. I will never try to restrain your artistic freedom. World's foremost leading expert on the music of Ted Nugent is Ted Nugent.
Right.
And if you want to, I'm willing to take a behind chewing tomorrow for it.
Right.
I told you this is the conversation I said I
work.
and I think he agreed. And the funny part was as we were walking out, Ted Johnny, give me a hug, man. I love you, brother. You're always looking out for me at the thing. And my boss said, man, you told him he couldn't do something and he loved you for it. I said, I didn't tell him anything. We had a conversation.
Talked about it.
But folks, man, Ted has his opinions on things. And sometimes it's about the band. Sometimes it's about the brand. But again, and I told Micey, I said, I'm not in the censorship game. I'm not in the opinion game. I'm in the what makes sense for our model game. And in that case, it did. And I know we're pushing time. So before we hit our final five, by the time this runs, Leftover Last Waltz would have already occurred this year.
Yes.
But it's still going to be coming up next year. Man, let's talk about Leftover Last Waltz, which is an annual event at Cain's.
It is.
And now you're co-executive producer of it. Let's talk about that, man. Where'd that come from and what's it all about?
Yeah, so it's an event that's taking place at Cain's. I believe now is the 11th year, possibly.
I think so. I know it's over 10, so I think it's 11.
So it was an event originally put on by Matthew Schultz and his family, who had a family tradition of watching the film The Last Waltz the day after, or the Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend, and eating leftovers and communing together. And he wanted to share that with the rest of Tulsa, and he thought it was a really special thing, which it is. And so he did it for years, where he would show the film at Cain's Ballroom, and there would be a catered meal, and everybody would eat, and be a fundraiser. And Matthew moved to New York to become a lawyer, or he was already a lawyer, but to be a lawyer in New York, and got just too busy where he didn't have the bandwidth to do it anymore. And instead of letting it die, my partner Greg Bollinger came to me and was like, "Hey, there's this event. What about us taking it over?" And I said, "Yeah, that's great, but what about if we turned it into an actual show?" And he said, "We need to talk to Matt about that and see what everybody thinks." And we talked to him, and they were like, "Yeah, that's what we wanted to do all along. We just didn't really have the resources and connections."
The network,
like, well, luckily I do. So let's figure this out. And so we switched up the format a little bit, and we put together an all-star Tulsa band with Paul Benjamin as our band leader, but a great Tulsa cast: John Fulbright and Patty Ryan and Jesse Aycock and a whole slew of folks. And they are now playing the show as a live band. They're not playing it necessarily directly true to the movie, but they're playing the music from the film with some special guests. We have Jesse Dean coming from Arkansas, and a few other folks. And we're still serving dinner. That's still something we do. It's November 30th. It's on a Sunday. It'll be like the last Sunday of every November going forward. That's kind of the plan. And what we're doing now is set up to benefit what's called the Tulsa Foundation for Schools. And what it does is the money that's raised from this event gets put into an account that's earmarked for teachers in the Tulsa area who want to use music as an education tool in their classroom. So they may not even be a music teacher. They might be a math teacher or something. But they're like, "Hey, if we use whatever this thing is musically in our classroom to teach division or whatever, like, I think it would be super useful." And they submit for a grant through this fund and get approved or denied based on what they're trying to do. And so it's a way for us to kind of nurture some of Tulsa's future musicians, while selfishly enjoying some of the greatest music ever recorded by some of my favorite musicians on the planet. And everybody getting together to share a meal, which is a big thing for me. I've always been very drawn to the community aspect of eating with people that you love and feeding the people you love. I feel it's really important. And so, yeah, it's just a great way for everybody to get together, support a great cause, and hear a ripping band play some of the greatest songs of all time.
So if you want to write a check to Foundation for Tulsa Schools, you can. But if you want to have a really good time, look at Cain's in November. I can't see this going away anytime soon.
That's not the plan.
I've been to two or three. I was going to say 3 or 4. 2 or 3. And it really is a good time. And it's one of those things where, our talent pool here is so deep because... and if anybody's listening, Last Waltz was a famous documentary of the band's final performance.
Yeah, I make that mistake a lot. I always assume everybody knows what the Last Waltz was.
That Scorsese directed, and they had, Dylan and Neil Young, and everybody just kind of showed up. And it really has become a cultural, iconic event. But like hearing, I'm a big John Fulbright fan. Hearing John do the band songs truly is just a cool, and hearing all the Tulsa guys, hearing the songs in a different way is cool, but hearing it from folks who do it and knowing all the money's going to a good cause, and there's no event else that I like it, where there's a dinner and it's really more like, it feels like a jam session in your backyard than it does a concert with all your friends.
That's the whole idea.
And of course, this is how much, to all the listeners out there, I support it. I literally reached out to Phil and said, I'll work for free, like lugging gear or doing whatever, because it is a great cause and a great show. And again, look for it. And you can literally just Google Leftover Last Waltz and it's going to pop up. It'll be the first thing.
There's a Facebook and all that too.
Yeah, you can't miss it. Are you ready for the final five?
Yeah.
I'm so excited to get back to these questions. So final five, I stole this idea from Stephen Colbert. 5 questions that I asked every guest. I did rewrite them after I chatted with Chad and Hunter, because I didn't like the questions that we had, but 3 or 4 are still in the same vein. So number 1, setting all humility aside, and I know that's tough for you because you really are a humble guy by nature, but setting all humility aside, what's the greatest compliment you ever received and the story behind it, Phil Clarkin?
That one's easy. There's a man named Neil Casal, who was the guitar player for Ryan Adams and Cardinals, Chris Robinson Brotherhood. He was in Blackfoot back in the day. Mm-hmm. Incredible guitar player, incredible human, was also an amazing photographer. And I got to befriend him over time through my friend Jesse Aycock and Brian Horton and Dylan Layton, and got to get on a personal level with Neil. And I took a photo of him one night at the Bottleneck in Lawrence, Kansas. Mm-hmm. Chris Robinson Brotherhood was playing there.
Very, very Canes-like vibe.
It's Lawrence's Canes for sure. And he, being a photographer I deeply respected and loved his work, came to me afterwards and he was like, I don't know if we can cuss on this.
You can cuss, yeah, of course. And
he was like, fuck you, Phil Clarkin. This is the greatest photo that's ever been taken of me and nobody's ever going to top it. And now I got to live with this for the rest of my life. And it became a running joke for years, every time he would see me, fuck you, for taking that photo. And he actually, the Grateful Dead did a what was called GD50 in 2015, which was a core 4 members of the Grateful Dead reunited for the final time and did some shows in Chicago and in California. And Neil got tasked with the duty of making what was called Circles Around the Sun, which was the set break music. Mm-hmm. And so it was vocalist, instrumental jams that were in the vein of the Grateful Dead, but unique compositions, original music. And so Neil was doing that, and the Grateful Dead made a Facebook post where they highlighted Neil. And it was actually 10 years to the day a couple days ago mm-hmm. that it popped back up. And Neil, they asked Neil, what photo should we post of you? And Neil's like, well, this is the greatest photo ever taken of me, And so that's the photo they used on the Grateful Dead social media. So I'm an old school Deadhead, so that was a super huge, awesome thing. But over the years, Neil still continued to love that photo. He used it in a Hardworking Americans album. And even the last time I ever saw him, Neil has since passed on, for those who aren't familiar. The last time I ever saw Neil was at George's Majestic in Fayetteville. Mm-hmm. He was playing with Circles Around the Sun, and that was one of the last things he ever said to me. And fuck you for taking the greatest photo. It was just this on-running dialogue. But for somebody whose music I respected deeply, but whose photography I respected deeply too, and who as a person was just a beautiful, bright, shining soul that made every situation he was in better. For him to be a fan of my work was always just flabbergasting to me, because I was such a fan of his.
Man, okay, so Phil Clarkin just won this question. Not even, Neil Casal alone is worth, but I hadn't heard that story. The funny part is, my familiarity with Neil Casal came through photography first.
Right.
And then I was like, oh wait, this dude's played, man, and he can play, and he's with everybody.
Well, another crazy thing about that photo real quick too was, you're familiar with the artist Billy Strings.
Of course.
Billy reached out to me a few years ago and was like, hey man, I came across this picture randomly online, and I have a friend who's an airbrush artist, and I want to get it airbrushed on the back of a jean jacket. And so Billy Strings has a Phil Clarkin photo of Neil Casal on the back of his jean jacket that he wears sometimes. But he didn't know that it was Neil's favorite photo. He was like, I just randomly found it through Google search or whatever, and he had no clue that it was the photo that Neil loved.
Man, I will tell you my Billy String story is I was this close to getting him a year and a half before he played BOK Center at a fraction of the price for what he goes now. Right. And I told folks, I said, he is going to be, like every now and then I've hit it with Maroon 5. These guys are going to be massive. And we did not get him. But he was at BOK Center next. Number 2, again, setting all humility aside, Phil Clarkin, what's the best advice anyone has ever given you and the story behind that?
Best advice anybody's ever given me. So I had a photography teacher. I mean, I've gotten lots of great personal advice and human advice and all that. But we'll stick with photography for this question.
For sure.
I had a photography teacher in college my very first semester freshman year, who was also my student advisor. And the very first day of class in this college level photography class, we made a Dixie Cup pinhole camera. I don't know if you're familiar with the technology, but you literally take a Dixie Cup and you poke a hole in it and you put a slide of film in it and you manually expose the film and you go develop it in the darkroom and you make an image. And the lesson to be learned is that a great image can be made with any technology. The photo isn't in the camera, it's in the photographer. Of course, like we talked about earlier, the better tools, once you have the ability to be a photographer, make a difference. But if you don't have the eye, if you don't have the feel, if you don't have the timing, I can't teach you anything. And so that's one of the first lessons that always stuck with me and that I share with new photographers I work with. I don't make them build a camera, but I make them not focus so much on this piece of crap camera they think they have and focus more on what can you do.
That reminds me of the beginning of It Might Get Loud.
Oh yeah,
Jack White stringing his own guitar on a tuba.
Same idea.
You're like, man, it's who's doing it, not necessarily what.
Yeah, I always talked about Eddie Van Halen. Everybody wanted Eddie Van Halen's tone. You could put any guitar in Eddie Van Halen's hands,
and he sound like Eddie
Van Halen.
Man, what a great story. One of the new questions.
Okay.
And I'm anxious to hear this one. Phil Clarkin, from the moment you bought your first album until today, what would the most played song in your history be?
Probably Fearless by Pink Floyd. That's kind of my go-to song.
Well, there goes my guess. I had thought it was probably going to be Fish or Humphreys.
I was into Pink Floyd as a young boy. Van Halen, Pink Floyd, Black Sabbath, Pantera, and bands like that as a grade school, middle school kid. Like, that was it for me. I didn't get into the jam band stuff until I was in college, really. So yeah, Fearless by Pink Floyd, which is off the kind of the Deep Cuts album Metal, is a song that's always kind of been my mantra. It's been one of those that when I'm in a bad place mentally, it's kind of medicine for me. I can listen to it. It can reset me. It's been one of those when I feel like I'm overwhelmed and can't move forward with whatever it might be. Like, it's the song that gives me the power to. It's my favorite song. When people ask that question, that's been my consistent answer for probably going on 20 years now. The Fearless by Pink Floyd.
I would not have guessed.
Most people don't know that. But yeah.
I would not have guessed that.
It's a personal thing.
I have a playlist on my phone called Life, and it's 10 songs I can't have more than 10. And they've had to have been in my life for at least 25 years that I still go back to. Because sometimes I'll forget and I'll go back and be like, oh man, this is one of them, and I have to decide what to drop. I'm like I said, we've talked about a pre-jam band, Phil Clarkin, but I've always known you as, I've always known you as that way. Number 4, Phil Clarkin, what's the best present you've ever received?
Best present I've ever received. Man, I've gotten some good ones over my life. My mom bought me my first film camera back in the day. My wife bought me a couple really awesome guitars when I was trying to make that happen. It's really hard to say what the best would be. I don't know. Probably the best present I ever received is my son, I guess. He's the greatest gift that was ever given to me in my life, for sure.
And how old is he now?
He's 15.
Good Lord, man.
Yeah.
That's my daughter is 15, and it's a whole different, like middle school, they start developing their own personalities and getting into their own things. And when they're 15, they start standing beside those thoughts.
No, that's a fun adventure being a parent. And as you well know, it's whether it's good or bad, it's going to change. Everything just changes, and it's a new set of experiences. And what you realize was you thought all along your parents had it all figured out, and everybody's just making this up as we
They were just figuring it out as they went
right.
too. Does he have any interest in photography or art? Or
yeah, for sure. He's primarily an athlete. He plays football and he wrestles, and he's way into that. But he loves to come to work with me. He loves to be my assistant. He doesn't shoot a whole lot on his own or anything like that, and which I don't either. I'm not the kind of guy that's out shooting sunsets for the fun of it. You know, but I'm very task oriented, and he's kind of that way too. You give him a task and he's all over it. But I don't know that this is what he wants for his future necessarily, but he loves to be a part of it whenever we can include him. And during the pandemic, when the lock-in, he spent every day at King's Ballroom. You know, him and Brad got real close up there because he was just a little kid hanging out all day long while we were putting shows on.
I will tell you, based on the pictures I've seen on Facebook, like looking at him, you say football and wrestling, I'm like, oh, I can see that. Like, I would not want to get on his bad side, is what I'm saying. But I'm sure he has a heart that follows you.
Oh, yeah, he's got a heart.
Last one, Phil Clarkin. Trying to think. I would have not gone with Pink Floyd earlier, so I'm not even going to take a guess here. If you could join any artist on stage for one song, who would the artist be, and what song would you sing together?
It would be Fish, and we would do the song "Free."
Okay, in that case, I should have. Dang it!
Yeah. That's one of those songs. So the band Fish has this song called "Free," and it's really not about a whole lot necessarily. It can be about whatever you want it to be about, really. But it's one of those that magically appears in my life right when it's supposed to. Very strange. Serendipitous moments with that song throughout my life. It's a very just important song to me that's always helped me to heal and to smile and to move forward. And, so those guys I think are the four greatest musicians that have ever been assembled in one singular band that's ever existed, and that's my personal opinion. Y'all can fight me over it if you want, but to share a stage with those guys, like I don't think you could top that for me.
I will tell you, first of all, that's a fantastic song. Second of all, if anybody wants to start fighting over this, I will tell you the greatest artists have been 5 or 6 in my life. I'm not saying that it changes every day.
Yeah, no, it changes for sure.
But depending on what I've been exposed to, what I haven't, man, are you talking about emotion? Are you talking about technical proficiency?
Right.
Are you talking about... and again, that's the joy of music. I think it was Dave Grohl who said, you can sing a song to 20,000 people and they're singing it back for 20,000 different reasons.
Exactly.
And that's the joy of it. If it connects with you, I love how the universe from time to time just reminds us that the universe knows what it's doing by dropping a song or something.
No, I'll never forget a moment. We were in Las Vegas. I was working with Humphreys at the Brooklyn Bowl there. And so Robbie, the guy I talked about earlier, Humphreys' stage manager, is from Fayetteville originally and knew Steve Pryor pretty well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Steve was a good buddy of mine as well.
Missed that dude.
And the day that he passed, we were in Vegas, and Robbie and I found each other and shared the news and hugged it out and cried and whatever. And my wife and I were like, hey, let's go get something to eat. And we left the Brooklyn Bowl, it was still sound check, whatever. We walked into this chain burger joint on the Vegas Strip, and they had the radio playing through the speakers, and right when we crest the door and walk in, that song starts playing. And that's, if you know that song, that shouldn't have been on the radio in burger joint in Vegas.
Any burger joint, any chain,
right. And it's just like, whoa, one of those. Yeah, but it's done that multiple times in my life where it's just like whatever powerful universe in the world there may be sets that song in my life when I need it the most, and it just snaps me out of what I needed to be snapped out of.
Man, I will tell you real quick before we end this, because how people can see musicians in a completely different way. I remember hearing the news about Steve Pryor, the motorcycle wreck, and of course I was, if you do what we do, you're a fan of Steve Pryor. My dad was a criminal defense attorney, and my dad called me and he said, hey, did you hear Steve Pryor passed away? And I said, yeah. And he said, was he the one that came to my office barefoot carrying his boots with no shirt on about something. I said, yeah, that was Steve. Right. That's how my dad remembered Steve. And I said, man, yeah, that was after a bad day, I think. But and my dad had no clue that Steve was a musician, whereas us, like our worlds were crushed a little bit when he passed away. But the 4 greatest musicians assembled in one band, that's as personal as how you view. I mean, my brother's buried out of 51st Street Memorial. I won't go and see him without stopping by and seeing Steve. And Steve and I weren't super close, but when he was
tell
playing,
people about Steve all the time. Like as far as proficiency of guitar players are concerned, there's nobody that was better than Steve Pryor when he was on.
When he got on that his wavelength,
was on that thing. There's nobody better. There's people equally as good in their own right. You know, the Frank Zappas and Warren Haynes and whatever. Like these people are all amazing, but nobody was better than Steve. Nobody. Like and he had a way to play himself. He would play himself into a corner, and like those of us that are music people would be so tense watching this happen. Like, what is about to happen? And he would play the most brilliant thing to come out of it, and it was like this huge emotional release for everybody in the room to watch it happen. And like he could play any type of guitar, he could play to any kind of music. Like he listened to what was happening, and he put the right things where they needed to be. He was loud and powerful, at times, but other times he was soft and precise.
He knew when to add the sauce and when to just leave it alone. He was great.
One of a kind. He was one of a kind. He truly was. We're lucky to have lived in the same city as he did and to experience him.
And it's one of those deals. If you see a Steve Pryor show, the next night you may see him like on stage with the Rangers or whatever, and you're like, what the hell? Why? This doesn't make any sense. But then the more you got to know our scene and him, you're like, that made all sorts of sense. Like,
once you understood the context.
Exactly right. That was it. Man, thank you so much for taking the time, Phil.
Thank you so much for having me, Johnny. This has been great.
Full warning, we may have to have a round 2 because our conversations are just getting started.
Right.
But for now, I really appreciate you taking the time, and man, I can't wait till this one comes out.
Awesome. Thanks, Johnny.
It's the 11% with Johnny B.